Do you ever paint something that is so beautiful that you don't want to touch it because you might ruin it, but then you realize that it does need a couple of little touches to look nice and polished? That is today's base painting. Welcome back to Adjustment Layer, which is a series on my channel where I take some of your submitted paintings, paint over them, offer critique, and turn all of that into a tutorial. And I do this series publicly instead of one-on-one because I very specifically choose these base paintings where I feel like a lot of you guys could learn from the very practical tips in these videos. So today's beautiful base painting was submitted by our Discord member Khadija. Now look how pretty it is. I don't want to change it too much. So today we're mostly going to focus on how a couple of extra tweaks, a couple of extra minutes on a painting like this can really turn it into something which is a lot more polished and dynamic. As always, if you enjoyed this video and find it helpful, then please do let me know by giving it a big thumbs up and leave a comment below. Hit that subscribe button and notification bell so you don't miss a future upload on this channel. And if you'd like your art featured on a future Adjustment Layer video, come join the Discord, the link is in the video description, and we have a whole separate channel for your Paintover submissions. Alrighty, let's look at Adjustment Layer episode 3. So today's beautiful painting was submitted by one of our Discord members, Khadija, whose page I've linked up in the cards and in the description below. This is a gorgeous portrait of, I want to say, a lunar moth girl, but as you can clearly tell, it is really good. The anatomy seems spot on and the rendering is definitely high quality. So today, instead of going in and fundamentally changing a bunch of different things, I mostly just want to add some finishing touches, apply some color and light principles, and bring this baby to what I would consider a polished state, ready to post online. Again, all of these are purely my opinions, and other artists would likely do it a little differently, but you lot are here to hear me talk, so yeah. As I did last week, I'm priming this painting by placing the character on a separate layer. Since the background was flat, I was able to do this pretty quickly by just using the magic wand tool and inverting the selection. But I did also go in and select around the moth wings with a pen tool and put them on their own layer because it will make life a lot easier in just a second. You'll see what I mean. Alrighty, let's dive into the tutorial. Like I said, I don't really want to change the anatomy because it looks pretty much spot on. The only tweak I want to make is to broaden the shoulders just the tiniest bit. They feel a little too narrow to support the head. Now, it could be a stylistic choice, and if it is, I would exaggerate the stylism a little more by making the shoulders even narrower. But I'm gonna err on the side of realism today and make those shoulders a little bit broader. Next thing I want to do is create some stronger shadows. Again, it could be a stylistic choice to have soft shadows, but the fact that the background is a flat black kind of clashes with that idea. If the lighting allows for the background to get super dark, that same lighting should also allow for darker shadows on the character, right? So I'm just gonna go in and darken up some of the shadows in her eyes and underneath her chin, maybe even around her hairline. I also want to add a stronger drop shadow from the wings down onto her face and hair, just to really sell that layering and dimension. Now let's look at adding a little bit of color variation. Since we want to maintain the super pale skin and hair, we're not going to add too many dark or opaque tones at all, but rather we're going to go ahead and tint the tones a little bit. When it comes to super pale skin, rather than do the usual warm light cool shadows, I actually like to switch it up and have a very cool toned key light while keeping the shadows warm. Especially with a character like this that is fairly dark and supernatural, having a cool light source will really push up that creepy factor. When tinting a painting, I tend to use a couple of different techniques. First, I'll mess about with a new layer set to color or hue blending mode. I'll selectively paint the highlights with a cooler, pale blue, and maybe bump up the warmth in the shadow tones. You can totally do this by messing with the color balance, mostly focusing on really tinting the highlights and the shadows. If you find that it ruins your values too much, you can try applying the color balance as an adjustment layer and lower the opacity of it. Then I go in and paint over some of the areas, trying to bring back some of the original values, blending everything in. I had to keep in mind that everything here was super pale, so whatever colors I used at this stage, I made sure to keep them super light. So with those initial big tweaks done, here's what we have after step number 1. One of my favorite parts of this painting is the painterly brushstrokes. It adds so much character to the painting, especially in the hair and the wings, and also the neck and shoulders. However, there is a slight issue that is actually making the painterly brushstrokes lose their effect, because there are actually too many of them. Hear me out. If I showed you a forest full of trees and each one of them is lush green and beautiful, by putting them together, we'd kind of lose the unique richness of the green in each individual tree. But say most of the trees were grayscale with only one green tree, you're instantly going to notice that one green tree, right? In the same way, when you have every single brush stroke be very defined and hard-edged, just because there are so many of them so close together, you're kind of going to lose the beauty of having painterly texture. So in order to really enhance the painterly brush strokes, believe it or not, we're actually going to have to get rid of some of them. I usually do this either using an airbrush or my magic brush, link is in the description for a free download by the way, and grabbing the local colors and blending out some of these brush strokes. I have the eyedropper tool mapped to a shortcut on my tablet, and it really helps with blending things a lot quicker because I can just pick the local color instantly at the stroke of a key. I'm just going around the painting, especially in the skin, blurring and smoothing things out. I'm painting over the freckles for now, but we will paint them back in later, don't worry. I definitely want to properly smooth out her eyes since that area tends to be glossy and wet. I'm basically going to smooth it out to make the texture look like that shiny third eye on her forehead while still keeping it all white. Again, we're not painting over every single painterly brush stroke, just enough of them so that the remaining painterly brush strokes really stand out. So after that smoothing out process, here's what we have so far. On a similar vein to step 2, let's take a look at enhancing hair texture by actually getting rid of some of the hair texture. This is something I go into more detail about in the Even Better Hair video, which I'll have linked in the cards above, but when it comes to hair, especially when it comes to straight hair, you want it to have a nice and healthy shine, but at the same time, have that believable hair texture. Here's the catch, having texture reduces the shine of the hair. Shine, in essence, occurs when light can bounce right off a glossy surface, but having texture causes the light to absorb into the material. And when it comes to hair, you're trying to achieve both of these characteristics that are basically opposites. Here's the trick, you want to only add hair texture in the midtones. We're gonna paint over the highlight and shadow tones to have them look fairly flat and only maintain that texture in the midtone where you'd have enough light to see the texture without it being completely lost in the shadow, but it's not so bright that it reflects back a lot of the shine. Now, I mentioned that I'm putting the moth wings on their own layer. This is because you see that translucence at the very edges of the upper wings? I really like that and want to preserve that in other areas of the wings as well. This is something I went into detail with in last week's adjustment layer, so I won't bother you with it too much, but here's a short version. I hid the wings, painted everything underneath as if the wings never even existed. I then brought back the wings and using a layer mask erased out some of the areas to partially reveal what lies underneath. Now the thing to remember here is that wings have little bones that are fully opaque. So make sure that if you're adding transparency to wings, you're leaving the bony areas fully opaque. It may be a fantasy character, but the more elements of realism you can bring in, the more believable your art will be. So with all of that done, here's what we have. Let's now go in and finish this baby up. First final touch I've been loving to add lately is glitter. Not even a question, if there is skin, there is gonna be glitter, at least in my eyes. Plus, I want to add a bunch of specular highlights to the eyes to give them that wet shine, maybe even the tiniest bit of gloss on the lips. Because this is a moth and moths and butterflies are known to be fluttery, I also figured she could use some even more fluttery eyelashes. So I'm just grabbing a local greyish colour and mapping in some lashes on a new layer. I'll then lock the transparency and with a white, add some shine to the lashes because we don't want them to be dark at all. I'm focusing on keeping the outermost lashes super long while the inner ones are going to be normal size, just to echo that lunar moth theme where its wings are longer at the end. With the background, I'm going to create a subtle gradient, nothing too crazy, but just to make it a tiny bit more interesting than having a flat background. I also downloaded a couple of free butterfly brushes, and I'm going to go grab a background color and stamp on a very subtle butterfly shape in the back. It just adds some more detail and gives the background some more substance. Coming back to the face, I like to duplicate the layer and apply the Smart Sharpen filter to the uppermost layer. I then mask it all out and paint back in just the details that I want to keep super sharp. I find that this is a lot nicer looking than just using the sharpen tool because it allows you better control over the sharpening parameters. I'm then going to merge all of the layers and open the camera raw filter. I love this step because it allows you to mess with the curves, color balance and distortion all in the same window. I'm going to tweak the color and light until I like the final look very intuitively. And as always, I'm going to throw in a rim light around the edges of her hair and those wings and apply a little subtle noise to the entire piece to tie it in together. And I realized during editing that I'd forgotten to put the freckles back in, so here's a little clip insert of me just painting some freckles on her face, just to make sure we're still sticking to the original character. And there is our finished painting. Thanks so much again to Khadija for submitting this beautiful painting and allowing me to paint over it today. I super appreciate it and I hope you love how the end product turned out as much as I do. And if you guys have enjoyed this episode of Adjustment Layer, then please do let me know by giving it a big thumbs up and leave a comment below. It really helps the engagement so much. Hit that subscribe button so you don't miss a future upload on this channel, and if you have any video requests, leave them in the comments below, or you can come leave them in the Discord channel called Video Requests, where it's a little less likely to get lost in the sauce. I'm still putting out even more detailed real-time tutorials over on Patreon, so if that's something you're interested, then check the link out. It's in the video description. And with all of that said, thank you so much for hanging out with me today. I hope you've enjoyed it as much as I have. Check out some more Adjustment Layer videos on here, and I'll see you guys on the next one. Bye!